I don't set the world fire. I don't want a lady in life I have only desire.
Okay, weekly production meeting starts in 5 minutes. Let's start on time for a change. And what the hell? Steve? Steve, are you... What are you... Fancy, what are we doing?
We're just playing Mousetrap.
No, we do not play live-action Mousetrap. What have you done to Professor Fluffosaurus?
I don't understand this game.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. I am your host, Steve the... Oh, well, we got you. That was Steve the Cat. I'm the narrator, Carl the Camera Monkey, joined by Steve's animatronic stunt double, Fancy the demonically possessed animatronic, and Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus, Professor of Monsterology and Kaiju Studies. Welcome to the season finale for Season 1 of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. We've got a couple of fun movies for you this evening to talk about, and we were just going through some plans here for next season, and we were trying to decide if we wanted to do anything special for tonight's episode, but I think we're just about out of ideas, and we're just going to go with a regular episode tonight, so unless anyone has any objections.
Maybe we could do a segment called Season in Review.
Wait a minute, you can talk?
Of course I can talk. You just never asked.
Well, this is an interesting development. Okay, folks, we're going to get to the movies and learn a little more about our new character here at the end of the show. So, here we go. Stand by. It's time once again for Steve's vocabulary lesson, the part of the show where we investigate new and creative use of the English language in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban our content. This is Mother de la Morte's favorite part of the show, and you don't know what kind of pressure that puts on me. It's just me and the cat, and I have to come up with this stuff every week because I do not dare disappoint Mother de la Morte. I can only imagine what might happen to me if I do. Anyway, for today's lesson, word number 1, melonballing. What is melonballing? Well, this is a noun that refers to the action of removing a character's peepers from his noggin, typically in a manner that leaves the peepers intact. Now, colloquial forms of this term include gumballing and garfielding. Word number 2, infuegoinating, and you can probably figure this one out, but in case you can't, infuegoinating means the action of setting a character ablaze, and colloquial forms of this include baked Alaskaing and Richard Pryoring. So please keep these terms in mind. They will turn up later in the episode.
Hello, and welcome to Monster Chat. I am your host, Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus. Today we will learn about ghosts. Ghosts are a staple of many horror films and, indeed, play a role in the films we are discussing today. Ghosts were once believed to be the disembodied spirits of kaiju who have been defeated in battle. This is not correct. Another school of thought is that ghosts are the disembodied spirits of those who have passed on tragically, or who believe they still have business to accomplish on this plane of existence. This view also is incorrect. Ghosts are, in fact, a relatively common species of kaiju native to Norway, Bangladesh, and some rural regions of Oregon. Their ethereal form is the result of their involvement in a multi-level marketing scheme, and results from the fact that their contractual obligation has exceeded their natural lifespan. It is estimated that over 35% of ghosts are in fact representatives of the Mary Kay Corporation. This involvement with multi-level marketing schemes makes ghosts a particularly dangerous species of kaiju. Victims of hauntings and ghost infestations run a tremendous risk of overspending on cosmetic products and healthy herbal supplements. Financial records indicate that famed investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren accumulated shares in 17 different timeshares throughout the United States, a ghastly testament to their many encounters with ghosts. Despite the assistance of the Catholic Church, they were never able to void these contracts. If you are ever approached by a ghost, you should inquire about their policies regarding the acceptance of Bitcoin as payment. Ghosts are famously distrustful of cryptocurrency. In extreme emergencies, you can often banish a ghost by offering them Scientologist literature, as ghosts find the prospect of a billion-year contract terrifying. This has been Monster Chat with Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus. Thank you for joining me.
So we're doing something a little different on today's episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Instead of paying tribute to a particular Scream Queen or paying tribute to a particular kind of creature, we're doing a salute to a concept. We're going to talk today about films within a film. What do we mean by that? Well, it's a common storyline in horror movies to use film within a film. And basically what it means is, you've probably seen it a million times. A team of documentary filmmakers or the crew of a TV show encounter something spooky or scary or otherwise fantastic while working on a production. This is commonly used in found footage movies. In fact, it is used quite often in found footage movies, which makes sense because it gives a rationale as to why everything is captured on camera. A great number of low-budget found footage films, in fact, are of the, what we call, paranormal investigators get more than they bargained for variety. If you go just to Amazon Prime, you'll find 150,000 different movies of this variety, where a team of paranormal investigators go off on a job and capture something that is more than they can handle. It's a commonly used trope in low-budget found footage movies. That said, films within a film does not have to be used in found footage movies. It can serve as the backdrop for a conventional movie. So in today's episode, we've got two movies, kind of two different examples. We've got one that is more or less a found footage mockumentary kind of movie, where the movie we're watching is put together from found footage from the film crew. But the other is just a perfectly straight up conventional horror movie that follows the crew of a television show as they encounter something horrible. And so film within a film does not have to be used in found footage movies, but it is a simple story and simple way to make a found footage movie, so it is used very commonly there. So anyway, that's what we'll be dealing with today, films within a film, so we hope you enjoy them. Our first film for this week's episode is called Scare Campaign. And there you see the poster right there, really interesting poster. This is a masked killer movie, or you could call this part of the prank show gone awry genre. It was released in the year 2016. It's an Australian movie. It was directed by Cameron and Colin Carnes. And the cast includes Megan Warner, Ian Meadows, Olivia de Jong, and Josh Kong Tart. And as always, I apologize for any names that I mispronounced or otherwise butchered. Give me a break, I'm a cat. So, there's the awesome poster once again. Let's do a quick film summary of Scare Campaign. So, as I mentioned, this is an Australian masked killer film. And in this film, the crew of a popular horror prank television show faces falling ratings and a concern that their pranks maybe just go too far. Now, at the same time, their ratings are suffering in part due to the appearance of a new group of internet pranksters on the dark web, because they couldn't possibly get this stuff past YouTube censors. And these internet pranksters are starting to kind of cross the line between pranking and snuffing, and they've actually moved into what appears to be, honest to goodness, snuff films. So anyway, the crew is given one more episode to pull themselves out of the ratings slide and do something memorable, and that is kind of a standard trope of film within a film stories. You've got one more chance to pull yourself out or else you're canceled. So they put together a new episode that they hope is going to be memorable, and the target of their prank does not react as intended. Now, as things go along, the film moves along and there are multiple twists and turns. What you discover is that people who you thought were being pranked at the beginning are not necessarily being pranked, and other people who thought they were in on the prank maybe are the ones actually being pranked. But it's going to twist and turn so many times that you won't know who to trust by the time you get halfway through this movie. This is a very good slasher film. I enjoyed this a lot. It manages to build some real suspense and mystery into the action, and I'm going to make an admission here. When I was putting this episode together, I knew I was going to do the second movie this evening, They're Watching, and I was looking for a good companion piece to it, and I was looking for another film that I had seen a while back and clicked on Scare Campaign, thinking that it was a different movie. This is not the movie that I thought it was when I watched it. However, I like this movie even better than the one I was looking for. Scare Campaign is a very good movie. I really recommend this one. So let's talk about the villain profile. Now, as I mentioned, the story takes a lot of twists and turns, but one thing you can be sure of is that the masked freaks are villains, and you see a picture of one of the masked freaks there. Who are the masked freaks? Well, they are the psychotic pranksters who have maybe crossed the line from pranking into snuffing. They don't have any special powers apart from clever scheming. They're just people. Signature weapons, well, interestingly, each member carries a different signature weapon. Now, most of them are some sort of bladed weapon, but not all. There's at least one who carries a chainsaw, and there's one that carries a contraption that involves a steel cable. So they all have different signature weapons. So because of that, there's really no signature technique except for the fact that every kill is captured on camera. So that's your villain profile for the masked freaks for the movie Scare Campaign. So let's go to the scorecard for our first feature for this evening, Scare Campaign. Kills. 11. Now that includes kills that turn out to be pranks, and I count it that way because frankly with the number of twists and turns that goes on, it becomes very, very difficult to keep track of what's what. Plus, I don't want to give anything away, so it's 11 kills, including some that are pranks. Bare breasts. None. It's not that kind of movie. Denogginings. There are 2, and that includes one that we're going to talk about in a special case below. Christmas treeings. Yes, there is some Christmas festivity in this one. We do have a Christmas treeing, a very festive hanging of a victim. Bathtub de-stopperings, going all the way back to the very first ever episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat and the very first ever vocabulary lesson, bathtub de-stoppering. Yes, there is a bathtub de-stoppering. Now, this is a modified bathtub de-stoppering. It's not what you typically think of with a bathtub de-stoppering, but shall we say, once the stopper is pulled, the tub drains pretty quickly, so I thought it was a reasonable use of the term bathtub de-stoppering. Infuegoinatings. Yep, there's one of those. Lariat craniolectomy denogginings. There is one of those, so that is included in the total of 2 above. So of the 2 denogginings in the movie, one is a lariat craniolectomy denoggining. What is a lariat craniolectomy denoggining? Well, you'll just have to watch the movie, but when it happens, it's pretty darn obvious. And finally, Shyamalanings, named in honor of director M. Night Shyamalan, who is famous for his twists and turns. Multiple. Yes, there are multiple twists in this film. So let's get to Steve's final score for Scare Campaign. We're going to give this 2.5 paws out of 4. This is a very good masked killer movie that manages to keep you in suspense throughout. It is well acted and it has good practical special effects. Frankly, I am on the fence for giving this one 3 paws instead of 2.5. And really, the only reason I went with 2.5 is I would have preferred just the slightest hair more of maybe character development and depth to get this up to the 3 paw mark. But if you came back and said, no, you thought this was better than a 2.5 paw movie, I wouldn't argue with you. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I recommend it. I definitely think it's worth watching. So Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat definitely recommends that you watch the movie Scare Campaign. Our second film for this evening is called They're Watching. There you see the poster right there. This is a supernatural found footage mockumentary that was released in the year 2016. It was directed by Jay Linder and Micah Wright, and the cast includes Mia Faith, Bridget Branagh, David Alpay, Dmitry Dyoshenko, Chris Limke, and Carrie Genzel. And as always, being a cat, the fact that I speak English at all should impress you, but nevertheless, my apologies to anyone whose name I mispronounced. So let's talk a bit about this movie. I just love that poster. I'm not sure what it is about it, but I just love the poster for They're Watching. But let's do a quick film summary. So this is a supernatural mockumentary, a found footage mockumentary with comedic elements that takes place in rural Moldova. Now, if you look this movie up, say on Amazon Prime, it may be listed as a comedy. I dispute that slightly. We'll talk about that in a minute. The film crew for a home improvement television show in this movie travels to Moldova to chronicle an American artist who wants to relocate to Moldova. And yes, Moldova is a real place. It is a small Eastern European nation, and I believe it is located between Romania and Ukraine. In fact, I believe it's landlocked and completely surrounded by Romania and Ukraine, so it's not very big, not very hugely populated, but it is not fictional. So, the house she buys is far on the outskirts of town, and bonus, was once rumored to have been the home of a woman who was rumored to have been a witch. And we're not talking about hundreds of years ago, we're talking about relatively recently in the grand scheme of things. As the movie starts, the crew is returning to Moldova 6 months later to follow up on the status of the home improvements. So it's one of those house hunters type shows where they buy a fixer-upper and 6 months later they come back to see how things turned out. The Moldovan townspeople are very distrustful of the new homeowner and the film crew. They think the new homeowner is a witch, being a single woman living on the outskirts of town who is an outsider. And naturally the film crew is seen as associated with her, so the townspeople don't like them either. And there's other incidents that occur throughout the movie that are completely accidental, but kind of turn the townspeople against the film crew as well. The townspeople, we find out as the movie goes on, either overtly or at least covertly suspect that the homeowner is responsible for the deaths of several young children that have recently occurred. So again, they don't blame her outright, but the grumbling behind the scenes is she's a witch, she must be responsible for this. So as the film crew tries to shoot their episode, the locals close in to take revenge on the homeowner. Now, let's talk about the Gaussian distribution of horror film absurdity for a minute and how it pertains to this movie. So we've talked about this before, but let's draw the bell curve. So on the left side of this scale, we're talking about very campy movies. We're talking about movies like Jason X. Jason goes to outer space and battles a robot. On the far right, we're talking very serious movies. We're talking Silence of the Lambs. We're talking Malevolence 2, Bereavement. Movies that, you don't watch them to laugh. You watch them to be entertained by a serious subject. If we look on the vertical axis, we're talking number of films. So what the shape of the bell curve means is that you have a very small number of very campy films. You have a very small number of very serious films. And as you get kind of halfway between the two, the population of films gets larger and larger. So most movies are kind of serious, but have some comedic elements built into them. Now, by definition, your typical horror comedy is going to be on the left-hand side of this diagram. I mean, that's just the nature of things. You can't make a comedy that is serious. I mean, it's a contradiction. But the reason I am drawing this out is to show where They're Watching is located. You could argue that it's a horror comedy, but it is pretty close to straight down the middle between being campy and very serious. And what I mean by that is this movie separates the comedic elements from the serious elements. Very rarely do you have something frightening or scary or horrifying happen and then somebody immediately jokes about it. You got a couple of jokes that are kind of clunkers at the end, but for the most part, when the movie wants to be scary, it is scary. And the comedy is saved for kind of the filler scenes in between. It's kind of some comic relief with the real estate agent from Moldova. But they don't really ruin the scary stuff by trying to make a joke out of it. So a lot of the scary stuff in this movie is outright scary. So I have a hard time calling this a straight up comedy. I would call it a found footage movie with some comedic features. Anyway, let's talk about the villain profile. And in this case, our villain profile is a mob of Moldovan locals. And there you see them looking menacingly at poor Mia Faith. They belong to the class known as the violent mob, and this particular violent mob is of the Eastern European variety. Their special powers include large numbers, enthusiasm, and a resistance to logic. Their signature weapon, well, they don't really have a signature weapon. They've got a number of them, but that includes wooden stakes, ropes, torches, pitchforks, axes, and assorted farming implements. You see a little bit of that in the picture there. And their signature technique, well, that gets down to what one does with wooden stakes, ropes, and torches. So that's your villain profile for They're Watching. So let's get to the scorecard for our second feature for this evening, the found footage mockumentary They're Watching. Kills 28, and I say probably more. Things get very, very confusing at the end, and it's entirely possible that there's more than 28 kills. Bare breasts, well, there's none, but there is some brief caught in the act barn sex, and apparently it was a rush job because she's still more or less fully dressed. Car chases, none. Not that kind of movie. Christmas treeings, there's a couple. There's two, I say variations here because they're not literal Christmas treeings, but they do fall under the broad umbrella of Christmas treeing, so I'm going to count them. Insteepenatings, one. Melon ballings from the vocabulary lesson earlier this episode. I'm going to say two. Now that's one victim, both peepers. Infuegoinatings. There's multiple. I believe I counted at least two. Like I said, things get very confusing at the end. Douchey professional soccer players. Oh, good Lord. Yes, there is one of those. And worst episode of House Hunters ever. This time, yes, this is the worst episode of House Hunters ever, so we're going to give it 1. But with your viewing of They're Watching, you get some bonus features, such as an outstanding House Hunters ripoff. I'm telling you, I don't understand how they didn't get sued, because the music they used at the beginning of this is like straight out of House Hunters. I'm going to say right up front, our comptroller and all-around person in charge, Svetlana the hot intern, not a real big fan of horror movies, but she does love HGTV, so we have watched many an episode of House Hunters, and I swear to you, The spoof on House Hunters they did on this, if you just listened to it and did not look too closely at the logo on the screen, you would swear it was HGTV's House Hunters. The douchey soccer player is just not that into you. You'll see what I'm talking about there. Albatrossian boss's niece. Yes, Mia Faith's character is lovely and she's a nice enough girl, but she's just kind of Albatrossian. She just can't help it. Found footage camera glitches. I have tried to stay away from found footage movies that have the old trope of using lots of camera glitches to cover up where they would otherwise need to insert special effects. This movie does have a few. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of camera shake. There's a little bit of camera glitching to try to make you think something's going on. Only doctor in Moldova is best doctor in Moldova, even if he's actually a butcher. This is the running joke throughout the movie. The real estate agent is constantly saying things like, only restaurant in Moldova is best restaurant in Moldova. Only hotel in Moldova is best hotel in Moldova, and so on and so on. So that's kind of the comedic part of the movie that we're talking about, but they never really cross that over into the scary parts of the movie. They do a pretty good job of keeping it separated just as comic relief in between the scary stuff. You get a dog attack, and you also get a cat fight. And when I say cat fight, I don't mean literal cats, I mean two young women. You get enough frogs to qualify for an Egyptian plague. You get douchey soccer player barn sex. And finally, you get actors who play their own instruments. Yes, there is a little musical interlude in this where they whip out a few instruments and play a bit while they're in the local tavern, and I'll be darned if the actors aren't playing the instruments for real. And if you don't believe that, stick around for the after credit scene where they show kind of a live recording of it, that does not have the dubbed over improved sound. It's recorded studio live. Sure enough, they're really playing their own instruments, so hats off to them. So our final score for They're Watching, again, we're going to give a 2.5 paw out of 4 rating. This is a solid supernatural mockumentary / found footage film that keeps the comedy separated from the scares. The reason I gave this 2.5 paws instead of 3 is that basically it tries a bit too hard at the end. Things get really, really crazy at the end of the movie, and their ambition kind of outran the special effects shop's capabilities, and so you end up with some pretty cheesy CGI special effects. Now, they're mixed in with practical special effects, so it's not all CGI, but the fact that they've got practical special effects thrown in there just draws even more attention to the computer graphics, and not in a good way. So basically, between that and the other thing that kept this from being a 3-paw movie for me was the fact that at the very beginning, there is a trope in filmmaking where you start the movie in the midst of an action scene, kind of get to a cliffhanger, and then stop and then say 48 hours earlier and back up and show what led to those circumstances. And this movie opens up like that, but in the process, in my mind, it gives away something that they really should not have given away that early in the movie, so I was very disappointed by that. Overall, though, it is a good movie. I absolutely recommend watching this movie, so I would give it 2.5 paws out of 4, but definitely recommend you watch it. So, 2 good movies this week, Scare Campaign and They're Watching. All right, we're rapidly closing in on the end of another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. But before we go, let's talk about some other stuff Steve watched this week. Number 1, Deathgasm. In this movie, a New Zealand high school heavy metal band accidentally summons a demon, and many gory antics ensue. This is a gory horror comedy, actually from New Zealand, and frankly, it's mediocre. I wanted to like this movie. It had a pretty high score, all things considered, when you look at the IMDb rating, so apparently a lot of people do like this one. I won't say it was bad, I'll just say it was mediocre, and I wanted to enjoy this movie more than I did. I don't regret having watched it. I don't really feel compelled to ever go watch it again. It was just kind of middle of the road for me. But if you're into that sort of thing, you'll probably enjoy it. Number 2, Fear Farm, and that's farm with a PH as in pharmaceutical. In this movie, college students look for an evening of fun at a giant corn maze. Yeah, and that's even a source of humor in the movie. They understand that a giant corn maze is not exactly what you necessarily think of as a source of fun, but that's what they do. As they get into the maze, they are pursued by an assortment of killers. This one's pretty formulaic, it has its twist that's not that particularly difficult to figure out. Again, not bad, but nothing special. One interesting twist to this is that one of the killers, instead of being gory and horrific, is actually very attractive, so they kind of went the Harley Quinn route with one of the killers. That said, overall, it's a mediocre movie. Again, I don't regret having watched it. I don't think it was a good enough movie to really carry an episode by itself, so it's, again, just kind of a middle-of-the-road movie. Finally, Hell's Kitty. Yes, Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, we felt compelled to watch a movie named Hell's Kitty. In this movie, a man's obsessive, demon-possessed cat murders all of the women in his life out of jealousy, as often happens in real life. This is a low-budget, semi-autographical horror comedy that features cameos from a lot of horror movie legends. Michael Berryman is in this one, who you know from The Hills Have Eyes and many others. The two guys from Children of the Corn are in this one. A variety of classic Scream Queens appear in this one. There's a lot of people who make appearances in this one. That said, this could have been a good movie, but it really isn't. It's just too low budget. The writing and directing are just far too subpar for it to have turned out well. Now, if you're a cat person, there is a chance you'll enjoy this movie anyway. There were elements of this movie that I really enjoyed, being a cat person. But at the end of the day, it was a little too low budget. The acting was a little too poor. The writing was a little too poor. When I say semi-autobiographical, the writer describes it that way. And so presumably this is a guy who had a cat who had behavioral problems and drove women out of his life, and so he kind of made a comic horror movie out of it where the cat is demon-possessed and does horrific things to the women in his life. And the women in his life, in turn, do horrific things trying to get revenge upon the cat, and calamity ensues. I won't say hilarity ensues because, frankly, this movie fell short. I think given a really competent director and some additional screenwriters and a better budget, this could have been a really, really entertaining concept for a movie. But as it is, best I can say is that if you're a cat person, you might enjoy it. If you are not a cat person, I see very little chance that you'll enjoy this movie. Anyway, that's some other stuff Steve watched this week. Well, we're about to wrap up Season 1 of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Yes, as we told you earlier, this episode is the season finale for Season 1. Now, that doesn't mean we're going away forever, but it does mean we're going away for the summer. I've got vacation to go on, and I need to put some plans together for Season 2. But before we sign off for the end of Season 1, I just wanted to quickly go back and review some of the things that we went through this season on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. So, number of episodes, we did 11 episodes, and that does not include the additional special episode we did on Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. I am not including the special episode in the totals because we did not do a full-blown proper scorecard for that episode. But 11 complete episodes of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Movies reviewed. We did a total of 18. It took me a few episodes to get my feet under me, and then I realized I could probably do 2 film reviews per episode. So we did 18 movie reviews this year, and that does not include other stuff Steve watched this week. Scream Queen tributes. We did 4 Scream Queen tribute issues. Creature Cinema episodes. We also did 4 episodes that were Creature Cinema. Total kills for the 18 movies, 234 kills. Total bare breasts over the course of 18 movies, 39. Yeah, it's an odd number, which means somebody got herself partially covered up at some point. Car chases. I expected more than this, but for the entire season, we only had 5.5 car chases, and frankly, one of those is a bicycle chase. Denogginings. 13.5 over the course of 18 movies, so basically you had pretty much 1 denoggening per movie. So, just to talk a little more about some of the stuff we went through this season, we did Scream Queen tributes. We tried to do a theme for every episode this year, and for the first few, we did Scream Queen tributes. Now, I don't know if we're going to continue having themes for episodes when we get into Season 2, but for Season 1, we did a few Scream Queen tribute episodes, including a tribute to Mercedes McNabb, Alexandra Daddario, Shawnee Smith, and Katrina Bowden. And in the Katrina Bowden issue, we also included a tribute to Courtney Palm, who is the official Scream Queen of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Now, you can find photos of all these lovely ladies in a photo album at Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat's Facebook site. In addition, we've got photos of some of the Scream Queens from some of the other episodes of the show, which were not necessarily Scream Queen tributes, but featured Scream Queens nonetheless. In addition to Scream Queen tributes, we also did some Creature Cinema episodes. So some of the creatures we talked about in Creature Cinema include Bigfoot, big freaking sharks, Jotun, Wendigo, and vampires. So when you wrap all of this up, what it tells you is that, on average, a typical Season 1 film on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat included 13 kills, 2.2 bare breasts, 0.3 car chases, which basically means one car chase every 3 movies, 0.8 denoggetings, which means almost one denoggeting per movie, and scored a 2.6 paw overall rating. So, overall, it was a fun year at Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. We hope you have enjoyed it. We certainly enjoyed putting everything together. Well, that's a wrap on Season 1 of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. We hope you enjoyed tonight's episode, and we hope you enjoyed Season 1. We've just been sitting here getting to know our cast member. Can't really say new cast member because she's been here since the beginning, but she's never spoken up until now. So do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Guinevere Mackenzie.
That is a lovely name, Guinevere. So for the benefit of people who are new to the show, we have discovered that every animatronic used in the history of filmmaking contains either the disembodied spirit of a person who has passed on or a demon. It turns out every animatronic used in filmmaking is a vessel for either a demon or a spirit, and apparently that's because black magic is easier than learning control system engineering. So want to give us a little bit of an idea of how you ended up where you are?
I think my current situation is related to my long career in multi-level marketing.
Oh, that can't be good.
You look like somebody who needs some cosmetics, or perhaps an herbal supplement.
Oh, no. This is going to complicate things dramatically. We're going to have to come up with some new workplace rules.
So, are you single, Guinevere?
Yeah, we're definitely going to need some new workplace rules. Well, that's all for this season of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great summer. Bye-bye. Hey there, Steve. It's the season finale. You got anything to say? Or you just want to chill out in my lap? Sounds like you're just going to chill out in my lap. Okay, well, thank you for watching, everybody. We hope you enjoyed Season 1. We'll see you after our summer break with Season 2 of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Bye-bye.
Each week for thrills, chills, and a horrific good time. Don't lose your head. Join Psychomantium 13 and enter the weird.